Welcome to Lens of Leadership, our Ted Lasso rewatch podcast. Before we dive into this episode's leadership lessons, let's watch a quick recap.
Season 2, Episode 10. No Weddings and a Funeral starts with a snuggle for Sam and Rebecca. Rebecca's mom unexpectedly arrives announcing that Rebecca's dad has died. Isaac rallies the team for the funeral. Keely and Roy wax philosophical on funerals. Ted has a panic attack while getting ready. Rebecca is touched to see the entire team, not wearing trainers. Sassy makes it no secret what she thinks of Rupert. And she and Keely get Rebecca to spill her guts about Sam. Ted tells Dr. Sharon everything. And Rebecca tells her mom everything. Ted and team help Rebecca out with her eulogy. Jamie and Roy both love Keely. Rebecca calls it off with Sam. As the episode ends, they rickroll us all.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Coniglio.
And I'm Marnie Stockman, and this is Lens of Leadership, a Ted Lasso rewatch podcast. We're the authors of Lead It Like Lasso, a leadership book for life, your life.
And this podcast is an extension of many of the elements outlined in our book. We invite you to join us as we take a deep dive into each episode and explore the leadership principles as they play out in the series. And for today's episode, we're diving into Season 2, Episode 10, No Weddings and a Funeral.
And we are super psyched to have Shane Evans with us today. So Shane is joining us from across the pond in the UK. He's an HR and leadership coach whose mission is to help individuals and teams unlock their full potential, sound familiar, and foster amazing cultures. So when Shane first connected with us, I believe you used the phrase, I'm a bit obsessed with Ted Lasso and I'm equally obsessed with leadership. Would love to chat. So chat we did, and we enjoyed it so much that is why we asked Shane to join us for this rewatch podcast. So Shane, we're super excited to have you. How'd we do? Like, tell folks what I missed in that intro.
Well, that's a solid 9.9 out of 10. I think you've nailed a lot of the stuff. I think the two things, the passion about Ted Lasso, which we're going to talk about, and the passion about leadership comes from working particularly with lots of leaders in various different industries in my career. And the thing that we always talk about, right, is that people seem to be the central focus of whatever industry you're in. And the leadership of those people and the culture that works in those organizations tends to be a solid pattern through anywhere that you work.
Love that. You're speaking our language right there, Shane. So before we dive into the episode, question for you. Have you ever been rickrolled?
Not during a funeral, but I have been rickrolled.
Okay.
In fact, my kids seem to want to do it a lot to me at the moment.
Okay, perfect. So that will help us. Well, we don't need to do any video editing magic or anything like that. But so you mentioned earlier that you're obsessed with Ted Lasso a bit. Tell us what you love about the show. I mean, how does it connect with you? What's the thing?
Oh, well, I think I was a bit late to the party, and I guess this side of the UK, I'm not sure Ted is as big as he is in the States yet.
It was someone say, we should fix that, but go on.
I'm trying. I'm really trying. Someone came into work, a workplace I was at, and talked about this thing being a goldfish. And I was like, what's that about? And he said, you've got to watch Ted Lasso. And roughly about the same time, one of my favorite musicians in the UK, a guy called Frank Turner, one of his songs was part of the advert for one of the series of Ted Lasso. I put those two things together and started watching Ted. And you know what it's like these days where you can just binge watch things. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I started watching, and probably 3 days later, I'd finished. And I loved everything about it. And the thing that cemented the joy and the thing that really resonated with me, towards the end, and hopefully there's no spoilers, hopefully everyone's watched it, is the book from Trent Crimm to Ted, and can you give me some feedback? And of course, Coach Beard had put multiple markers throughout the book. And Ted had just in a short note, and that note said, you might want to think about changing the title. It's not about me and it never was. And I think once I saw that, as much as I'd loved the show, it just resonated everything that I think is important about leadership, about being in HR, about running an organization. That was the thing that made me go, everything's just come together now. I'm going to have to watch again.
Yeah, and then you've probably just not stopped since then, if you're like
Yeah,
us.
I don't know I don't know what lap I'm on, but
Yeah,
I've done a few laps. Let's put
yeah,
it that way.
I hear you. So today we are looking at No Weddings and a Funeral, which at first glance really doesn't seem to be about leadership, except for the fact that one of the things that Nick and I talk about all the time is leadership is life. And with that, how you do anything is how you do everything. So even in personal situations, your character really does still stand out. So if I were to ask you to pick a character from the episode and talk about one of their traits that we've seen in this episode or other episode, like how does their character play out? What do you think?
Yeah, I've done some thinking about this, and I went multiple places. First thing, when you say leadership is life, I can't not say it, but in Danny Rojas' voice, right? So his
Yes.
voice in my head. Um,
That is exactly what we were hoping you would do. So our
every
plan is
time,
working.
every time. Hopefully, we'll talk about Danny a little bit, but I had to go for Ted, right? And it might be, I'm sure a lot of your guests have gone for Ted when they've had this opportunity, but I just think in this episode, particularly, we see a different side to him. We see him go deep on his emotions. We see the pure vulnerability that he's always had to a certain extent, but we see it at another level. And I think it just makes you love and appreciate Ted even more.
Yeah,
No
this
doubt.
one, I mean, people talk about it on the social media all the time about the feels that the show brings, and this episode for sure absolutely brings the feels. And with Ted, you just really connect with who he is. You can see his character and the authentic version of himself. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a TV critic, but even as a show, a standalone show, when you see the parts that are interwoven in just in that episode, it's a remarkable piece of television, I think.
yeah.
And that probably makes it sound like I know anything about television making, but I genuinely don't. But you get to see so many characters and the leadership elements that they have in life just through one episode. I think that's a really clever thing to do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
agreed.
we are constantly amazed at how that comes across. And we can talk about that one thing, you know, how brilliant the writers are in every single episode. It constantly amazes us. Um, but this particular episode, really there was a theme across the board around having tough and awkward conversations. You know, and there were so many of them, whether it was Rebecca telling Sam that they needed a break, or Jamie going in and telling Keely that he loves her. You know, another one with Rebecca about telling her mom about the affair that her dad was having, finally unloading that. And you mentioned Ted, right? Really being vulnerable and opening up on the details of his dad's passing. You know, I don't know anybody, myself included, who really likes to have tough or awkward conversations. So I'm curious, in your work, just in your life, is there something that you have in terms of advice around this topic? You know, anything that you can share?
I think, firstly, I think if I think about my career in HR in the early days and throughout my career in HR, and then moving on to kind of doing consultancy work in different organizations, this is a common theme and pattern that comes through most of the leaders that I've ever worked with. And I don't think anyone has that conversation too early, right? It's usually they've waited too late to have a difficult conversation. And I think partly, I think it can be a good thing, right? Because it means that that leader might care. It might mean that they genuinely want what's best for the other person. Um, but I think, you know, for all leaders, if they could have those conversations maybe a little bit earlier, I think wouldn't do any harm.
Yep.
I think it's being aware of the circumstances in which the conversation's happening. I'm thinking about Jamie in a funeral. Probably
Hmm.
wasn't the best place to have that conversation with Keely.
I finally think that I'm becoming the best version of myself. The kind of man that you always knew that I could be. And I know that this is a mad, shitty thing to do, but I love you, Keela.
surrounded by people. And I'm sure if Jamie could examine that and think, was that the right thing? But he was overcome with emotion, right? It makes him human. And I've seen some leaders who have had these conversations and had them really badly, and I've worked with leaders that haven't had the conversation at all, and I'm never sure which one's worse, to not have it or to have it really badly. And I think an encouragement for all leaders is to be brave and bold enough to remember the intent of why they need to have the conversation, because generally, leaders don't want to have that conversation to pee people off.
Yep.
Didn't swear then. So pee people, to annoy people. They're doing it to help them grow, to develop that person, to point them in the right direction. But quite often a leader will forget that in the moment of saying to the person, here's my intent. I care about you. I want to have this difficult conversation. Sometimes they'll go straight in for the kill, straight in for the jugular. And it's equally as bad as not having the conversation at all, I think.
As you kind of were talking through those scenarios, I want to circle back to the brilliance of the writers as I'm thinking about this, because they presented this topic in so many different scenarios, and they presented different lessons. I don't know if this is just me. I just want to talk through this, right? When you talk about Jamie and Keely, again, probably not the right time for Jamie to do it, but it showed that it was necessary. Being uncomfortable with Keely, it was necessary for growth. He talked about, I figured out best version myself, and closure. He needed some closure. And then with Rebecca and Sam, the way she kind of put things on hold was with care and integrity. And then it gives you the counterexample with Rebecca and her mom. They show us that avoiding the tough conversations, it leads to resentment and a lack of trust. I mean, the writers, they give you all these tools to kind of figure out, right, all the things that we're trying to say, which is have it sooner rather than later and kind of do it the right way. And I have so much admiration for how they present things in the show.
Absolutely. I mean, there's some really subtle bits of brilliance in having conversations throughout that episode alone, right? And I'm delivering some organizational feedback to one of my clients, which is about feedback, because again, it's one of the themes that comes through a lot of the work that I do. And organizations will bring me in and say, we want to help leaders to be brave enough to have the difficult conversations. Great. But we forget it's a two-way street, right? Feedback is about taking it and receiving it. And the example of Rebecca and Sam in the closet having the conversation, Sam handles it really well. It's clear that he's hurting, but at the end of that conversation, he says, just got to warn you about something. I'm only going to get even better, or words to that effect.
I understand. Take as long as you need. It's okay. Thank you. But Rebecca, there's something I should warn you of. Yes. I'm only going to get more wonderful. I know.
And that, I think, is a level of brilliance in how to accept feedback, to give a bit of humor, to note it, to make sure that you've listened to that feedback, and to make sure that people don't leave the situation hurt in some way.
So first, I'm super salty that I've watched the show twice more this week, and I didn't pick up on what Nick said. That is brilliant that they showed the counterexample, which you and I talk about all the time, right? The counterexample sometimes proves the case to have the feedback straight away, but with Rebecca's mom and Rebecca bottling it up, that was well caught there, Mr. Coniglio. I think that was brilliant.
He's done his homework.
He has done his homework. Darn it! I tried to do my homework, but he is definitely better at that than I am, for sure. I think the other important part that is unsaid here, just because it wouldn't have come up here, is that you have to have the conversation and not in a text message, right? You should deal with it immediately, but not via text message. And I think that's super important. Again, it wouldn't have happened at a funeral, but it has got to be face to face, not always in a closet at a funeral, but needs to happen for sure. Um, you mentioned chatting about Danny. I think this would be a good time to talk about Danny because we want to talk about the theme of showing up for your teammates, right? Supporting those around you. So we'd love to talk about how that played out in this episode and then what that looks like in business. I mean, not all of us have to go buy dress shoes to in order to support our boss, etc. So what do you say on supporting your teammates?
Oh, I think, again, all of the organizations I work with, like if you imagine three circles, and in the center of that circle is me, and then there's an outer circle with we and us, and then the outer circle, it's it and the project and the task. So often, as leaders, we focus on the task and what has to be done. And actually, we need to flip that and focus on people and then the team first in order to get the culture right, to get the stuff done. And the way that the team come together, and it's a great scene. There's two great scenes actually. One is in Ted's office, which would be great to talk about, and one is in the locker room, and Isaac shows leadership.
Hey, so we're all going to his funeral as a team.
Right, he says, "Oi, we're going. Like, it's not negotiable. This is what I expect." And then it was, you're gonna wear a suit, a shirt, a tie, and no trainers.
I love the
And
shirt too for Jamie. You're gonna wear a shirt.
you will wear a shirt. And the only kickback from the team was about the trainers, right? Which I know is a bit tongue in cheek, given that the
Yeah.
footballers.
Yeah.
There was the comment from Colin, I don't have time to queue outside for the special trainers. It's dress shoes. No one ever wants them. And I think the way that the team realized this is bigger than us. This is about Rebecca. This is about showing up for her as a team. And the counter, I guess, and the bit that I love about this episode is when the bus pulls up outside the funeral.
My condolences.
Thank you.
Sorry, Miss Welwood.
How many of them came?
All of them.
And Rebecca goes up to Higgins and go, "Oh, they're here. How many of them came?" And he went, "Well, they all did." And then she went, "And none of them are wearing trainers." And it meant so much to her, the fact that they'd all shown up, in spite of it was a little bit uncomfortable. And we could talk about Danny was the most uncomfortable in that episode, right? He was in tears. Like, I can't remember what does he say? Jesus has no space in this conversation with his dress shoes.
Yeah.
That's how serious he took the pain that he was in. But he still shows up regardless of that, right? Regardless of the pain.
Yeah.
And
And
it
what's
was,
that look like? Oh, go ahead.
no, I was just going to add, and I love that, the whole notion of the team showing up, but it was evident in other parts of the episode as well, right? With Keely and Sassy really being there for Rebecca. Obviously Dr. Sharon, being there for Ted. That is a somewhat of a doctor-patient relationship, but still all the same. And it just, it talks to the fact, if you think back to season 1, I don't think, do you guys think the team would have showed up if this would have happened? But Rebecca has built the trust within the team. She has transformed herself, right? And she's allowed to put herself in that position. And I think about the days, at least my early days in leadership, I don't know if my entire team would show up to an event like that, right? And I think as a leader, you have to start to become conscious of, am I not checking the box? Am I establishing the trust with my team that they will be there for me in my moment of need? Not only because that helps me, right? But that helps, I think, kind of what you were saying with the circles earlier, us, right? And what we ultimately want to do.
So that's interesting that, because we said at the beginning, you wouldn't think that this episode was about leadership, but it really is a sign of Rebecca's growth in her own leadership, to your point, Nick, that everybody showed up for her, where the first season they wouldn't have.
Absolutely. I cut you off, Marnie, earlier. Was that what you were going to say?
Probably not, but I was doing a better job being a good listener than being a good talker. And so I have no idea. It'll probably come back to me at some point, but I'm not worried about it.
Okay.
It's a sign of a great conversation, though, right? When you're so stuck in listening and thinking,
Yeah.
that's a really good point, you forget about the reasons why you're here, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I'm totally good with whatever it was I forgot.
I think, with regards to showing up and coming back to the character that I picked, Ted was at his lowest. Yes, he's asked for help, but he's asked for help so that he can get to the place he needs to be for the team and for Rebecca. And I think surely that's a great example of a team showing up. When they're at the darkest, they still show up for each other.
Now, I completely agree. And I'm curious because I see our book in the background and you've read it. Did you, on the character assessment, did you take the character assessment and did you end up as Ted or
I
Ted
was
or
Ted
Sam?
and Sam were my top
Oh,
two.
that's a pretty good combination right there.
I was happy with that. Obviously, I answered them in the correct way for me. Um, we do that sometimes with personality assessments, though, right? You fill them out and you go, "Oh, really? I didn't want that one." But I was really happy with that because I just think, the optimism that Ted shows throughout all of the series, even in probably his most challenging, there's the bit where he brings humor in. He is really emotional and he says, "I don't know if it's illegal, Dr. Sharon, but can I hug you?" She goes, "Yeah, of course." And then he goes, "Are you still going to charge me for this session?" And she went, "Yes." And he goes, "I admire your integrity." Like that optimism, that use of humor, I think is really special when he's at his lowest. And Dr. Shan said something along the lines of, "I'm sorry that your dad did that to you." He says, "And my mum." So he's always thinking about other people. And I think that bit really resonated with me
Mm.
throughout the whole series. So I was kind of glad that I'm glad that I'd answered the questions correctly in the book.
Yeah.
That's interesting because when we talk about the characters, and Nick and I just have done this at a college recently, that the piece we highlight for Ted is that one of his weaknesses is he's so worried about other folks that he doesn't take the time for his own self-care, which is what led to the panic attack. So I think that it definitely is one of his strongest character traits that we see play out lots of ways.
Yeah.
Was there, Shane, was there anything else in this episode that stuck out to you that you wanted to discuss?
There was one quite subtle one, which is in Ted's office right at the start of the episode, because you've got the Diamond Dogs with Keeley, with Roy. And of course, death is the thing that combines us all as humans, right? It's going to happen to us all. But their personal viewpoint on death, I think, highlights some of their innate personality, thoughts, and being, because you've got Ted's words are something along the lines of, "I used to believe that bad people went to hell, good people went to heaven. Now I realize we just all do both. So I just hope that he's happy wherever he is." You've got Roy's quite dark view on you live, you die, that's it,
You're
game
done,
over.
yeah.
Keely's got quite a nice view of, "I want my body to be decomposed into a tree and my loved ones can eat my fruit." You've got Higgins, who wants to be reincarnated into a world full of animals and he could sit at his cat's feet. And then you've got like a glimpse as to what's to come with Nate, right? Because he says, "I want to be reincarnated as a tiger and I'll ravage anyone that looks at me in the wrong way." And I think it's really interesting to get that glimpse of their characters from one conversation about death. So I thought that was a lovely thing to kind of, for the writers to put in again.
I
Because
think
if we're
yeah.
people watchers, like many of us are, you get to see the real people when they don't realize people are watching them, right?
So here's the moment where I'm kicking myself because that is, I mean, that's awesome insight. Yeah. I mean, as you explain it, I was thinking that because I remember the scene, right? It's very beginning, right after they found out the news. And I was like, you're absolutely right. It gives us a glimpse into all the characters and where they come from and where they're going. That's awesome. How
100.
about you, Marnie? Did you have anything else
Well,
from this
the only part of that I had caught was the bit about Nate when he says the tiger, right? You're like, Now, did I catch it the first time I watched it? Probably not. But in the second go round, when you're starting to watch and you know where Nate's going, like, there he is again.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there's two other scenes that really strike me in the episode. One I'll come to last because I think we're all thinking about it. But I think the other one is Roy when he makes the kind of apology to Keely in the funeral just after Jamie said that he loves her.
Oi. Listen, I was a prick today. Making dumb fucking jokes is just... Death makes me uncomfortable.
Roy went up, and I think he's done some learnings, which shows his arc of his character. Right, it shows that he had some beliefs, and then he showed some vulnerability in that apology conversation because he said, "I'm sorry. I've when my grandfather died, I prayed every single day that I could see him just once." And you get to learn actually he was hurting, and that was his macho British football character that was saying death is just death. And I thought that was a lovely scene to show that even leaders get it wrong sometimes. You can't always have the right conversation all the time. And if you do get it wrong, there's nothing to stop you going back and saying, I've learned some stuff about myself over the past hour, day, week, and putting it right. So I think that was really important to notice.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I saw, and I've watched this episode so many times, but I watched it again last night, just one more time, and I never really connected the dots. But the whole notion of the fact that a lot of times pain clouds perspective, right? Ted was so focused on his dad's suicide, he really forgot what a great dad he actually was. And he recanted the story about not reading the book and his dad helping with that. And that was paralleled with Rebecca, right? She was so focused of the pain that her dad's affair, had on her and her mom, that at the very end she remembered, Ted reminded her that, it was really her dad's ability to bring her joy that she had completely forgotten because pain really just clouded her memory of everything. And I know that hit me because I think we all have those situations where, something you felt like somebody has done wrong or something to that effect. And it really clouds all the good memories that you have with people. So I took that away from this episode.
Even
sure.
since this one's a funeral, I think it brings it out more. A couple times to have watched a family member really ill with cancer and passing away, it took a while before you could remember the good stuff because you just were clouded in that piece. I managed to say that without tearing up or cracking, but it was close. Just for the record, anyone playing along at home, I was on the edge of that. So I'm going to switch gears completely and say, Shane, if there was a trick play, aka life hack, called the Shane Evans, what would it be?
Can I just talk about one more scene before?
Yeah, 100%.
Yes.
Because we can't go without talking about being rickrolled, right? We can't go.
Oh, yes.
We can't go without saying about the funeral scene. And actually, there's a lovely video that I play in a lot of leadership development programs, which is I call it Naked Dancing Guy, but it's the video is basically a guy on a hill in a music festival, topless, and he's dancing away. And the video is about him. He's making some movements. He gets one follower, the first follower. Of course, him on his own, he's just a lone nut. Got the first follow, and then a momentum is created, and it's exactly the same. And I'll probably switch to using the Ted Lasso scene where Rebecca's giving a eulogy, and she starts doing, never going to give you up, and she gets a bit emotional. Everyone's like, "What's going on?" And I think the fact that Ted got there, had her back, tells us about how important it is to show up. And then importantly, when she was really struggling, he started singing along. Second follower comes in, starts to create momentum. Keely joins in. And before you know it, the whole church is singing Rick Astley, Never Gonna Give You Up. And I think that probably sums up leadership, right? Is who's the first follower, take them along on the journey, and then create momentum.
You've just done it again, Shane. First of all, brilliant. And, Marnie and I are very familiar with that video, the first follower video. And, oh, darn, I wish
I
I would
know
have
he
connected
got
those
us
dots.
again.
Darn, you're good at this.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah. Oh, well, and
Maybe I'm
when
watching
does
too much
anybody
Ted.
remember when they realized they were being rickrolled? Like, because when you hear the song the first time, the mom's playing it throughout the house.
Yeah.
Did you know you were being rickrolled? Was it in the funeral, or was it at the end when Rebecca's
end,
saying, "Is that really Rick Astley?" I think it was at the funeral, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, they're rickrolling us!"
Yeah.
But do either of you remember the first time you saw it?
For me, I think it was the video cassette at the end when there's the baby video, and then it goes into Rick Astley. And I think
Yeah,
I think
they
so
got
too.
me.
I think me as
They
well.
got me.
Yeah.
No, I think I might have picked it up in the funeral. I felt because I remember feeling pretty good about it. Like I wonder how many other people realize what they just did to us. Those darn writers were in a funeral and they're still getting us.
Love it.
That's excellent. So, anything else?
Yeah.
I don't want to.
No.
All right,
I
the
guess
Shane Evans. What
the
is it?
Shane Evans. So I've come up with a trick play called the Trust Triangle. Because I think it highlights some of the stuff in this episode, right? And some of the things that I'm passionate about, and some of the things that I really work with teams. One is vulnerability. So encouraging leaders and individuals in a team to be vulnerable, because then you're building trust. So the second part of the triangle is about trust. If you think about a lot of leadership models, like the 5 dysfunctions of a team, it's all built on trust, right? If I don't trust the person I'm working with, whether that's AFC Richmond or whether that's I don't know a manufacturing site, the person next to me, I have to be able to trust that they know what they're doing. And once you've got that trust, you've got psychological safety. And for any of us that are interested in psychological safety, the third part of the triangle, there's so much data out there now that we have to be psychologically safe as human beings in order to get our best performance out. So
Yeah.
I think developing those 3 parts of the triangle is a really key way in my life. So if it's even not work related, am I showing up for my kids? Are they seeing vulnerability in me? Do they trust me as their dad? Do I do the things that I say that I'm going to do? Are they safe to be 100% themselves? And I think if we could get those 3 bits of the pyramid or the bits of the triangle right, I think we would do okay.
You've made me think because Nick and I have talked about this before. We talk with a lot of high school and college age students and working on developing their core values. And the interesting piece is so many times children that age are there's angst with their parents at that point, right? But a couple things have to happen. First, the children are realizing their own core values. They have to figure out how they fit into their family culture. But the other piece is in order to give your child psychological safety, right? You spend all the years of their life helping them be safe. So you can't appear too vulnerable, right? Because you're trying, like, you've got to be able to solve all the problems when they're 2 years old. You don't get to be vulnerable to your 2-year-old. You have to be super powered, right? To keep them safe. And at some point around those teenage years, there's this, all right, how am I going to be vulnerable without being weak? And how am I going to say no to my 8-year-old can't be on all their cell phone all the time, right, but still be vulnerable in other ways? And I think that balance is super hard, and we talk about leadership being everywhere, and that really just came to mind in that trust triangle.
Yeah. Even us parents, we're human. Same as every leader. And I've done it myself where I've thought about, my child's having too much time on the iPad. And there's me with my phone in my hand. Like I've got to go first. I've got to role model that stuff, right? So I think it's about us being 100% comfortable with who we are as parents, as leaders, knowing that we're not perfect, understanding that chances are our children are emulating something we've said or done.
Yeah.
At some point in their little lives, right? We have developed a lot of those beliefs. And there's a great saying that I read about the other week, which was parents go through their whole lives wanting a thank you, and kids go through their whole lives wanting an apology. Because we just look at things differently, right? And we get to our older selves and we think, why did they do that? Why did I miss that? Exactly the same as Dr. Sharon and Ted. And I'm so glad you brought that up because we just forget the good stuff sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that is excellent. Well, I like your trick play. I think the Shane Evans is one for the leadership books for sure. So tell folks where they can find you, get in touch with you, hear about you every single day for the year on LinkedIn. Tell them how to get a hold of you and who you like to work with.
You know, when you start something and you think, oh God, what have I done?
What have
Um,
I done?
what have I created? Um, so a good place is LinkedIn. So if you search up Shane Evans coaching on LinkedIn or Facebook are the two main places where I'm at. To reference what Marnie was talking about there, I guess I've challenged myself to post on LinkedIn and Facebook every day. Well, it was every day in January, and then it's gone to most days. I haven't missed one yet, and we are day 38. So I haven't missed one yet, but they're good places to just check out the stuff that I talk about. And most often than not, it's about leadership or it could be about TED. I sometimes do a TED Tuesday because they've gone down really well. And actually, some of the people that have read the TED Tuesday posts have then messaged me and gone, I loved that. And actually, that's been a great place to recommend your book for
Oh, well,
a
thank
lot
you.
of the people that follow me because I've got to say it's an amazing book.
Oh, you're
Oh,
very kind.
you're kind.
Thank you.
And we'll include, if you're okay with it, your LinkedIn profile link in the show notes. So that's awesome.
Yeah, we're
Shane,
super excited you joined us.
yeah, we can't thank you enough. This has been great. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I was so worried that I was going to be speaking for hours and hours and hours because I can if you want me to, but like the stuff that you've taught me today has been really really powerful for me as well. So thank you so much.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thanks.